Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Council. I'm Yousef, and I am joined by my other council members, Liam,
Hello.
Sohail,
Hello.
Natalia,
Hi.
Ben,
Hi, everyone.
and Yousef.
Hey.
And this is a very, 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 very special episode because joining us today, we have the directors of Fatman. We love this movie so much. We have Ian and Eshom Nelms. Hi, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us. Appreciate you having us on.
Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. We've said this and we're going to say it again. We really love this movie. It was so much fun. It was just what we needed in 2020. So thank you for that. Let's get right into it because we have a lot of questions. My first question is, movies start with trailers, and I don't know about you guys, but I love trailers. They're my favorite part. And the trailer for Fatman was like amazing. It was so good. How much input did you guys have on that first trailer? Did you kind of give notes? Did you go back and forth? And what was your reaction when you first saw it?
It was sort of based off of a sales trailer. So the first thing we had was like a 5-minute sales trailer that the producers put together, the financiers put together to go shop around to different countries. And they cut a pretty darn good one. And we honed that in pretty well. I think maybe like 3 iterations later, we ended up with something that was like what you saw in the trailer, but obviously longer and had a little more in it, because on the sales trailer, you want to show the whole thing so that someone can just watch the sales trailer and go, oh, okay, I see the scope, I see the story, I see the characters. So it started with that, and then we really liked what we'd come up with the trailer company on that one. We didn't cut it personally, but we just gave notes on what they were cutting. And then when they put a trailer forward, it wasn't, the first trailer we got wasn't quite in the vein of what we had. It was focusing on some other things in the film, or I guess focusing on what the film is, but in a different way. And I remember just going to them and saying, hey, can we lean into that sales trailer a little bit more and just sort of try to cut that down to sort of a 2.5 minute version. And that's really what they did. They went back, they used a lot of the stuff that they had, and it was the same company. So the same company kind of leaned back into what they had done before.
And I think the Refinery cut the trailer, right, Ian?
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
And they're out of LA. They're super talented people over there.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Liam, I believe you have the next question.
Yes. So,
Although I would say one thing about the trailer, sorry, just to digress for a second. Ian and I's first pitch to them was like, hey, let's not reveal that he's Santa Claus in the trailer. And they were like, that's not going to work.
Yeah, because it was a good build-up when you watch it, because like you don't know anything about the movie, and then you watch and you're like, what is this? And then you're like, wait, do they mean Santa? And then as the trailer goes on, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Anyway, Liam, go ahead.
yes. So concept-wise, Fatman, bit out there. So how difficult was it to sell to studios to get to be like, this is the movie, do you want it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 14-year journey, so it wasn't easy.
Okay.
We had to do a couple movies in the interim between conceiving it 14 years ago, and we actually conceived it a couple years before that, but we actually had a comprehensible script about 14 years ago. And to be honest, Liam, there's a lot of no's. A lot of, what, somebody's going to make this. I don't know if it's going to be you. What is the tone of this movie, right? Because it could be total farce on one end, or more of the grounded take that Ian and I ended up going with, or something in the middle. So it took a while, and ultimately what pushed it over the edge was our previous film, Small Town Crime. Gave us a film that we could point back to and say, hey, this has got a little comedy, it's got a little drama, it's got some action, it's like a contemporary Western. And through finally getting to make Small Town Crime, we were able to make Fatman.
The other, I'll say the other tough part of that, which we didn't realize at the time, was that it was a Christmas movie. And I don't even think that our producers at the time realized that was going to be such a tough thing. But I remember when we went to go, distribute it, it was like, oh, this is going to be tough, or sell it to other countries. It's going to be tougher because usually you're dealing with a lot of studio fare, and not just like Marvel movies, but you're also dealing with like studio Christmas movies. So you're having to compete with films that have 10 times the budget of what we had. And usually, they're a lot more 4-quadrant, they're a lot more
Yeah.
family friendly, you would say. So that it was a Christmas movie made it doubly hard. Not only was it, a genre bender, but it was a Christmas movie. And then, yeah, it was a lot. That's why it took us 14 years to make. And we just kind of had to, luckily we just kind of had all the elements kind of hit together at the same time.
Yeah, I think
It
for a
did
while,
land.
like a lot of those early meetings, I think people just wanted to see the psychopaths that would walk through the door, and then they would wonder what deep-seated trauma we had during Christmas holiday time, which fortunately we don't. We love Christmas, and it was a revered holiday around our house.
Oh, that's fantastic. I believe Ben has a question next.
Yes, so once you managed to get this film greenlit, how much creative freedom was granted to you by the studio for this very bloody, very adult Christmas movie?
Well, we did the movie independently, which ultimately allowed us quite a bit of freedom. We had producers that believed in the film, believed in the vision that we wanted to execute it in. So I would say, Ian, disagree, like virtually it was, they let us make the movie we wanted, which we were very, very grateful for.
Yeah, and it really came down to, because that's rare, right? I mean, usually there's a whole bureaucracy along the way, but as Eshom said, we made it independently, which helped us a ton because there were meetings before we made the movie with studios and other bigger production companies and mini majors and whatnot, where they would say something like, well, why don't we take the kid with us on this? And it's a hitman and the kid road movie. And they both go to Santa's lair and learn about themselves by the end. And there's not really a shootout because you can't have a shootout with a kid. And we're like, yeah, that's not really the movie we're making. So we definitely got suggestions from people to sort of, pull it back and make it way more like comedy centric, let's make Dutch, kind of that movie Dutch with Ed O'Neill and the kid. And it just wasn't the movie we wanted to make. So to keep it intact, we went and made it independently. And yeah, luckily we had the right team that was on board, and the actors came on, and they were not only, into what we were doing, but adding to it themselves. And like, they were very into, they were in 110% with the vision that we were after. So they just knew exactly what we were going for. It was awesome.
Yeah. And I guess when you make it independently, you got to be a little more scrappier, a little more creative, a little more frugal in your budget. So it was definitely a trade-off, we had to, but for us to execute the movie or to get to make the movie that we had envisioned for so many years, that was the paramount. And we had to go out and do that.
We had to find a way to make what we wanted for what we had to make it in the independent market. Cause it probably would have been 3 times the budget if we would have gone with a studio, or decided to make it more of a 4-quadrant movie, or, capitulated in a couple of other ways, but it just wasn't really the movie we wanted to make. So.
Well, I think the trade-off was absolutely worth it because it turned out just as good as any other studio movie. I think Yousef has the next question for you guys.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, hi guys.
Hey.
Hi. So, you two were the writers of the film, right? You were the writers and directors.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. And I think you guys just came up with a brilliant idea of a revenge story of a kid who wants to assassinate Santa Claus because she gave him a lump of coal for Christmas as opposed to what he actually wanted. How did you guys come up with that idea, by the way?
Well, look,
go ahead. You can go, Ash.
No, I just think for us, what we really gravitated towards was the act of making Kris Kringle like an everyman, right? Like giving him, very human foibles and idiosyncrasies, something that we could, that you could relate to, that most common people could relate to. Ian and I are from Central Valley, California, so we sort of felt like we sort of plucked a rancher out of that demographic that we used to live in and cherish so much, and like, hey, let's make that guy Santa Claus,
Yeah, I mean, he was very much in the vein of how we grew up and the people that we grew up around, like very blue collar, and even though he's a factory owner, he dresses in Carhartt, and he's, even though he's out in the snow, he's driving that truck around, like that. Those are a lot of the same traits and that we grew up with. A lot of the people that we, not only, we made another movie called Lost on Purpose, which was a dairy farmer. And I could see a lot of those same traits, in dairy farmers, in, the agriculture and dairy business that we grew up in, you know, sort of that's a lot of it was based as well on like the relationship between Chris and Ruth was based on our parents, you know, who had a horse ranch. They were professional photographers for about 20 years. But they also had a horse ranch, you know, our entire life. So we grew up on a horse ranch, which of course is a lot of Wranglers and Carhartts.
But I think as far as like getting, you know, getting a kid to hire a hitman on Santa, Ian and I have taught swimming lessons for many, many years, a decade now. And most of the kids were absolutely lovely and just wonderful experiences. But you'd get that occasional outlier kid that might be a little rowdy, might be a little spoiled. And you know, it wasn't hard to extrapolate out that maybe one of these, you know, very privileged kids might take a hit if he didn't get his way, you know? So that kind of like was a leaping off point. Are we still on?
Yeah.
They cut it. You're out.
Sorry.
And you're done.
Ben's like, that's not a good answer.
That was a brilliant answer, actually.
Yeah.
I believe the next question will go to Sohail.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you was talking about the budget earlier, and I was wondering, what was the process like to finalize that budget for Fatman, and how you utilized it for the whole movie, including advertising?
So a lot of the budget stuff comes from, like, there's a budget that we wished we could have had, you know, and then there's the budget that you have to sort of back into because of the actors you've cast, you know, those choices that you've made on that front line. You're like, okay, these are the people we really want in it, and then it's like, okay, well, in a marketplace, this type of movie is worth this much, and so then you sort of have to back in with these actors, and you have to back into that idea, back into that budget. So that's pretty much how it was set. You know, we said, hey, this is our movie. They said, okay, great. Who do you want in it? This is who we have in it. They use their magic calculators, basically go check in the foreign market, and they say, hey, how much would you pay for this movie? Germany, UK, Australia, you know, like, is this movie exciting to you? And a lot of them are like, yeah, it's exciting to us at this price point, you know? So they have to sort of do their magic math and figure out what it'll be. And then our sales rep / producer has to sort of do her magic calculator and say, okay, with all these territories that are interested, this is kind of what we're going to be with the domestic sale and all these foreign sales. So once that was set,
yeah. Well, it's just interesting too, because you have a number and then you don't realize, and then we're going to go down the rabbit hole here, but we don't want to, but just getting money costs money. So it's like, you may have a certain amount, but then it's 10% less than that, or 20% less than that, because the interest on the money. It's really an interesting experience.
Yeah. So I remember getting the budget for the film, and then they were like, okay, well, here's your budget. And we're like, okay, great. And it was just under $10 million, about $10 million, let's say. And they were, to make the math easy, you're like, okay, 10 million, you got $10 million. Okay. Well, it's going to cost $2 million for the loans to get the 10. So that $2 million of cost goes into your $10 million budget. So now you have 8.
But
now you really have $8
budget.
Right. So then your $10 million budget is really 8, because $2 million of that goes to paying for the loans that are at such a high rate, because they're loaning you money for only 1 year or less, that the rates are so high, because that's the only way for them to make money in that short of time. So the rate of interest on that money is just insane.
Yeah, and then you got to pay your actors off of that. So when the pie just keeps getting smaller, and then at the end of the day, you have a very humble amount of money to go out and actually and realize the movie with.
Yeah.
And then as far as the marketing, the second half of that was up to Saban, and Ian and I actually don't know the spend on marketing. So that was in the distributor's wheelhouse.
I will say that we did have a lot of say on what the poster work in the US was, which was great. You know, I think it's the one where Chris is head, and then there's a little skinny man running around down there in his coat, and it's a very snowy landscape. And we got to have a lot of input on the US one that Saban put out, but we had no input on the one that the UK put out and other foreign places where he's like bleeding and there's explosions going off behind him, which, you know, didn't quite represent what we thought the movie was. It was a little more, you know, action forward, but
I will grant eye-catching.
But they did catch your eye. You're like, what is that? Santa with explosions going off around him? Okay.
So, with the perceived success of Fatman, has it allowed more freedom for yourselves going forward in other projects that you've got coming up?
It's
That's a tricky question.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Ash.
Nope, you got it.
Oh, I was going to say it's a little bit of a tricky question, right? Because the film did really well, thank goodness, and it absolutely had people coming. We have people coming to us saying, "Hey, what do you think of this script? Hey, what do you think of this script? What do you think of this movie? Would you guys want to do this movie?" Which is great, which is really great. But then it's not like it could be, but I'm just saying the short answer is yes. The short answer is yes.
But it's not that simple. But yes.
But it's also very complicated because the short answer is yes, but it's also complicated because I don't know, Esh and I don't like to stay inside the same genre and type of film. So like when it's like in a way, like you could think of it as like in Hollywood, they like to sort of put you in a box and they're like, okay, these guys make Santa action films. Okay, here's 15 Santa action films. You guys get ready. You're going to do about 5 years of these Santa action films. And you're like, wait a minute. I want to do this sci-fi, or, hey, I want to do this horror film, or, hey, I actually want to do a real Western time, in the time, or, hey, I want to do a drama next where people just sit around and talk and we can just, feel.
Emote.
So yes and no, you know what I mean? You have a successful film or a film that does well and everyone says, oh, that's what they're good at. That's what they do. Go do the 15 Santa action films. But yes, it has. I mean, yes, it's been great. Yes. Easier, I don't know, because every one of them's hard, right? Because it's like, Small Town Crime for the size of that film was really successful, but it took us 3 years to get Fatman on its feet, after that, just because it takes so much time to get the actors attached and schedules coordinated. And then, sometimes you get no's, in some of those actors' positions, and you have to try to find, someone else that's excited about it. Or you get financiers that say no, and you have to go find other financiers that are excited. It just takes time because they go, okay, we're going to go to this financier. And then you wait like a month for them to get back to you, whether they want to say yes or no, because they have to not only read it, but pass it around internally to their 5 or 6 people that say yes to things or no to things. So it takes like a month to get a yes or no. And then it may take you 50 yes or no's, to finally be able to make the film. So then you're like 50 months out. You're like, holy shit, that took 4 years to get this going. It's a weird thing that happens where it's like, you can't go to 5 actors at the same time. You can't go to 5 because it's just, bad business. People want to feel exclusive and they want to feel like you really want them for the part. So when you go out to financiers, it's similar. You can't go out to 50 financiers at the same time. You kind of have to let this person decide, and then they decide, and then you go to the next person and you let them decide. They all want to take their time. They want to do their math and they want to do their homework. So yeah, it's a process. It's a real process. And that happens for everybody. That's not just because of who we are and where we're at in the business. That happens for everybody. The guy making the $200,000 film and the guy making the $100 million film is having to go through that same process, which is why people are like, why is it taking so long to get this movie? It's just like everything about it takes so long and there's such a process.
Yep. None of them are easy. They're just different.
Yeah. Every one of them's tough because of that. And it's like, you only need one yes, which is great, but you need to have, and then you need to have like 12 yeses in a row in several different areas. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it to all go, the casting, the producers, the financiers, it's all of it has to be yeses. And it's like, boom, time's right, go.
But we've been fortunate in that a lot of our collaborators, both in the past and now with Fatman, we've had a great experience together, and they want to make more stuff. So
yeah.
Hi, I'm one of the local socialists of the group, and so my question will be a bit heavy. So seeing as Christmas is the kind of holiday that aids the continuation of capitalism and consumerism, was it your intent with, okay, let me properly read this question. Was it your intent to further the theme of consumerism with the involvement of the US military, especially considering Kringle's lack of enthusiasm to join in the first place?
I think that it's interesting. It's interesting that people get wrapped up in the politics of it, right? Because when we started thinking about the idea, we had no politics in mind. We had, how would this really work, right? And so we were like, okay, how would this really work? He would probably, if Santa was real and he had to get all these supplies, he would definitely have to have money of some sort, because he's not just like pulling in lumber and microchips and magnets and whatever metals. He can't just manufacture all that on his own. He doesn't have a full-blown everything operation. So he'd have to probably import some things to build things. So that was where we started. We're like, okay, well, he'd need money. And then it's like, well, he probably didn't need money back in the 1600s or the 1700s. He was probably just building wood toys or whatever. But now, when little Johnny asks for a laptop, how's he going to put that together? He can't just chop a tree down and put that together. So we're like, he's going to need other things that he's probably not used to having. And then like who or what, and because we live in the US, because we happen to be Americans, we were like, okay, well, maybe America would come to him and say, hey, we'll subsidize, you can keep doing this altruistic thing. That's great. Good for you. Way to go. Benevolent, jolly. You're making everybody toys. That's good for you.
But also like they have a spin, right? Like they're benefiting from the holiday fiscally. The whole world is stimulus through it. So there's absolutely that angle. Like, yes, without a doubt.
Yeah. So then we're like, okay, well, the US comes in and why would they do that? Why would they want to subsidy him or give him money to make toys? Well, because it perpetuates this multi-trillion-dollar holiday, which, is across the world. Like it's such a finance, it's financially motivated, but it's great because Chris keeps to doing his benevolence. But a byproduct of that, which I don't know if anybody was like, oh yeah, well, we keep doing this for a while, it's going to have a downtick because kids are going to turn naughty because they, they're just getting toys and they just want, physical things, and they're not really worried about being nice to anybody. They just want more and more and more, and it gets worse, and more naughty piles up, and now the naughty outweigh the nice, and now Chris is in a, he's in a bit of a tailspin, and now he needs to subsidize his subsidy. Like, how's he going to do that? And we're like, well, we had read this article about the American, like the Air Force.
So the military wasn't making any of their control panels for their fighter jets because they were too labor intensive. So they were farming them out to other countries,
like China and India.
Yeah, and we're like, wow, that's pretty interesting that something of such national security would be farmed out to other countries. Wouldn't they desperately be trying to seek a in-country source? And so that's where that motivation of having the collaboration between the government or the opportunistic collaboration between Chris and the government came in. Were they kind of putting the screws to him a bit? Absolutely. Would he want to do that? Absolutely not. But did they have him in a position where he is susceptible?
And did they plan on that 300 years out when they made the deal, or 200 years ago when they made the deal? Probably not. They probably didn't have that foresight. They probably thought, okay, look, we can build a holiday out of this. It's going to be great. And then it just happens that 200 years later, they've got him over a barrel. But I don't think they're just going to chip in money and bail him out. It's kind of like, okay, we're not going to bail you out. You're going to have to do us a favor if you want us to scratch your back. And so it's this kind of just the predicament he finds himself in. And although I think all those wonderful things like your capitalism, socialism, US government, pro or con, I think all those things are really interesting, but we certainly didn't set out to like pick a side. You know what I mean? We weren't setting out to be like, we're pro-military, we're anti-military, or we're pro-capitalism, or we're anti-capitalism. It's more of a social commentary rather than like we're trying to really pick a side. It's more like we're stating that you could say a problem, or this could be a problem. We're definitely bringing light to something. And it's stuff that's socially relevant now, which is great, which just happens to have gotten more relevant over the 14 years we were trying to make it, which is great. As far as like a talking piece about the film, that's great that it became more relevant, but it definitely wasn't conscious that we were like trying to pick a side. I mean, I think those are all interesting conversations, and we find them interesting as well. We're like, oh wow, it's really cool that became more relevant, and crazy that it seemed to be getting more relevant as we were making it. And then of course COVID hit, and the politics really sort of tightened as far as the tension in the US. And it's really interesting that it became, that politics became so sort of polarizing that no one really wants to listen to each other. And if you pick a side, then you're on that side and no one can have a conversation. And, so we certainly did not pick a side when we wrote it 14 years ago. We just thought that it was an interesting scenario, and that was probably how it would really go down. And if the bad was outweighing the good, that he would totally get the screws put to him.
But we also enjoyed that there was an arc with the military, right? That they come in, they're sort of strong arming them into this. But at the end of the day, like the military actually becomes to truly admire Chris's the elves and how diligent they are and how their way of life and the whole thing. So we really enjoyed the arc in that, and then the elves mutually, I think, gain a little respect for the military.
And then ultimately, you could say that respect or that love for each other goes as far as that the military puts their life on the line for them at the end, trying to take this guy out. So we did like that, and we did like that. We have family and friends that have been or are in the military, and they're good people. It's not like they're just good. They're just people. Everybody's just people. So I guess in a long form answer, that was what was behind our thought in putting it all down. We like that it's a talking piece though. Like I love that. I love that it became more topical as it got closer to being made.
Yeah, and I think the writing of it is really smart. And it's clear that you guys did your research. Like the realism is off the charts. I want to ask about this because I find this really interesting. We're seeing a trend now where there's kind of like a division between critics and fans when it comes to the reception of a film, especially on Rotten Tomatoes, where you see a lot of films that are really, really good, like yours, that have a rotten score, but the audience reception and the audience score are very, very, very high. Why do you think, there's been such a division and in fan favorite films like this and others?
It's hard to tell. It's hard to say. I mean, you can read the reviews and sort of piece together what you think, but it's interesting because I mean, we've read all of them, and we try to read all of them. We try to be, even-minded. We like to read the good reviews and the bad reviews, and if we feel like there's something in either of those that's worthwhile. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, you can look at the people that. I guess we knew we were making a film that was going to be, polarizing in a way, because I think we definitely knew that we were approaching Santa in a way that was going to be polarizing to people.
That can be touchy. You put guns and it can be touchy.
Yeah, I mean, and you can read some of the comments with the critics and some of the audience where they're like, "Hey, this isn't a kids movie," and we were like, "Okay, well,
yeah, it never was a."
No, it's not a kid movie. That's why it's rated R, and that's why the trailer shows, some gunplay and some action, and that it's interesting that people have gone into it thinking for some reason that there's some child element, and they're like, I can't have my kids in the room during this, and we're like, no, don't do that. Put them to bed, then watch it if you want to watch it. So it's interesting to get dinged for that or have to see complaints for that.
I think look, the biggest takeaway, rarely, look, the outlier movies are the ones that are universally loved, right? Like most movies have some sort of divisiveness to them, and you're not going to make everybody happy no matter what. Even if you have a movie that's 99% on Rotten Tomatoes, I mean, there's people that gave, the freaking Godfather a 0. So you just can't worry about the zeros. All you can really do is focus on the people who get the movie, and that's it.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes back to that first comment you had, Yousef, when you were like, okay, you guys are doing a great job on social media. Like it's fun, to read some of the tweets and to see your answers that you're giving on some of those. And I mean, and that's honestly, like, we make these movies to communicate with people, like it's like we absolutely made the movie to connect with people in a way, right? You make this movie that's in your head, you throw it out there, and you're like, okay, well, how many people are there like me out there that will find this entertaining, that will get all the sort of little messages we put in there and the questions that we have in there and about society and about people and about life and about, what if we took this benevolent being and sort of, made him real? What if he was real? What if we had to do this? What if we had to do that? Like, and all the social commentary we were talking about earlier, like all that stuff is so much fun to play with in film because it's just make-believe, and you get to sort of, have a dream and wake up from it and think, thank God, we don't have to deal with that. Or wouldn't that be interesting if we moved in that direction, because it's a really positive way to think about it. And that's what's so fun about making movies, or even writing to a certain extent, is that you get to have those conversations afterward. And we make these to have those conversations because that's what's so fun about making movies, is connecting with people. What was the question? I'm a little off topic, aren't I?
No, you're on it. That's it. It was
that was good. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's been happening so much. So I just wanted to get like the opinion from the filmmakers themselves of the difference. But Ben, I think you have a question about something similar, kind of.
To Nat's question, yeah.
Your
it kind of built.
question 3. Your question 3. The
Oh
COVID
yeah.
one?
Okay. So, do you think that COVID-19 helped or hurt your film's outreach in terms of its release and stuff like that?
Well, I can only tell you what it did. I don't know if it helped or hurt it. But what it did is it allowed us and a lot of other smaller movies like ourselves to have an opportunity to find an audience because all of the major tent poles pushed off. So there was that opportunity created by it, which, you know, that's just what it was. So that
the other thing, I'll say the other thing that it did that leans right into what Eshom just said is that not only did it push the tent poles off to next year, and I mean, look, some of them were like, oh, shoot, we don't want to wait till next year. Get Wonder Woman 84 out there now because, look, some of these films are doing really well, and like you can still make money on your movie in this sort of market, even when people are shut in their homes and a lot of places can't do theaters. Like we can still, we can still make our money back. Let's put 84 out, put it out before the year ends, before COVID's lifted, before the COVID bans or restrictions are lifted. But what it did do as well is it gave us a shorter window between our theatrical. I mean, for what was happening with COVID, our film did phenomenal for a COVID film being released theatrically. It didn't make its money back by any means, but that wasn't the point. The point was to give people who were right. It
Yes.
didn't make its money back in theaters, but that wasn't the point. The point was to give people who are at least in a place to watch it theatrically the ability to watch it theatrically. Like we didn't even get to watch it theatrically because it was shut down in LA the whole time. But it's really cool to see people.
It overperformed and did really well.
It did incredibly well in VOD. And now, like pre-sales on Blu-ray, we're like top 10 now. We were 15 last night, or 12 last night, and I was excited about that. And then this morning we popped up to 9 for pre-sales of discs, which is just nuts. The competition of real big movies, studio movies that we're up against is just nuts. So, and I think a lot of the conversations like that we're having now, that people are having, amongst themselves, is what's kind of perpetuating that. They'll watch the movie, they'll have questions and be curious about it, and they'll talk to their friends and say, hey, did you watch this? And they'll start talking about it, and that's awesome. That's exactly what we were hoping to do with every movie you make.
And I think you're absolutely right, and it expedited the trend of the narrowing window. So that absolutely was brought to a head.
So it shot us onto VOD a lot quicker, which it would have been like a 3-month or 2 or 3 month window, but it shot us onto there really quickly because, theaters were now like, okay, we understand COVID's a problem and we got to get some content to people because they're stuck in their homes. Like, get this stuff out quicker. So we came out really quickly after our theatrical, I think literally like a week. And then we were able to get right to audiences immediately for the whole Thanksgiving and Christmas season. And people are stuck in their homes. So you're stuck and you're like, what am I going to watch? And they're watching a lot. So they're binging everything and you just run out of stuff because there hasn't been a lot made in the last year. So there's not a lot coming out. So it's like, well, let's watch this Fatman movie. You know what I mean? Like, and a lot of these smaller movies like Cosmos and Fatman, and I mean, we don't have a small budget as Cosmos. That's astronomically small, and they did phenomenal for how small they are. But it's an interesting premise, and it's a cool movie, and it absolutely would have been more overlooked if you had to compete with James Bond and the new Batman or whatever. You should have been sacked because a lot more attention, a lot more conversations would have been going into what makeup they used on those movies or what they were trying to say in their commentaries or whatever. But it was really cool because it opened up a window for us, and it made people like when we were kids, and you didn't have VOD, you had to wait for these windows, and there was a lot more conversation happening, and movies were staying in theaters longer. They would be more relevant on DVD or VHS, whatever the medium was. Yeah. But they would be a lot more relevant, and there would be a lot less movies released. So we kind of had this weird retro swing that happened for this year, that our movie got to stay in all these, hot topic places for a lot longer. And there were less movies. It was old school. It's like we're in the late 80s again. There's less movies, more conversation, and bigger windows. It was awesome.
Yousef?
I wanted to
Sohail,
I wanted to ask, because you both are brothers and working with siblings on anything can be quite traumatic or great or whatever. I was wondering, did you set out early in your career to work together, or did it happen by circumstance? And what was that process like for Fatman?
Got it. Well, I think Ian and I have been blessed in that we grew up in a rural environment, so it was either get along or be really lonely. So from that moment, like from our from being brought up there in rural California, we got along great, and we would go to the movie store every weekend, and we would rent half a dozen movies and buy a box of donuts, and that was our weekend, was eating donuts and watching movies. And I think our cinematic tastes sort of synthesized in that window. And then we all went our separate ways. Ian is an amazing wrestler, was placed top 3 in the country at one point, and I went to art school for painting and drawing. And one night while we're there, but we'd always had a love for movies throughout our childhood, but it was this magical place that they came from. And we would sit there and watch, eat our Captain Crunch, watch Predator and all that, and Indiana Jones. And these movies are of such a grand scale that you can't quite see the craft in them. And I remember, I was at art school, and Ian's in Cal State Bakersfield at college. And we, unbeknownst to each other, we both watched the exact same 2 movies in the same night on like a Sundance Channel or TMC Up All Night or something. And we watched The Barfly and The Real Blonde. And I called Ian the next day, and I was like, wow, and I was having a miserable time at art school. Was not enjoying it. And I was like, man, I watched 2 really amazing movies last night. And he's like, you kidding me? I watched 2 amazing movies last night. And we both watched these movies. And that summer, we just started geeking out about movies. I said, well, and we were both landed on the idea, like, come home for the summer, we'll write a script, and we'll make some short films. And we did that. And honestly, we never looked back. So I came back that summer, we wrote a script, or we started to try to write a script. And this is in our 20s, I mean, a lot of people these days are going to like film high school. So that's, a little late to get into filmmaking, but we didn't know it, but all through our lives, we were accumulating the tools to make movies. So our father's a photographer, and we would work in his color lab and do the shoots with him. He had a small video production company where he would do like local commercials and stuff like that. So we were introduced to video cameras and, editing systems and all that stuff. I mean, Ian made his first like kids movie at 8 years old. And then I remember a guy at work like cut us into Predator, so we were shooting like little inserts to cut ourselves into Predator when we were just little small kids. So it just was this paradigm shift where it was like, holy smokes. And I had the ability to draw, so I could do storyboards and stuff like that. And it was just like, oh wow, all these tools we've accumulated in our life have sort of coalesced into this occupation of filmmakers. And it just made sense. It was like this light bulb moment. And Ian and I have become so dysfunctionally codependent in our process now. We just moved to LA and was like, let's do it. We bought cameras and started doing it that way. So I guess that's a long way into your answer, but
I'd say one of the most interesting thing was I read this book by Tim Ferriss called The 4-Hour Workweek, and he kind of put in perspective, kind of our process in a little bit of a way. One of the elements of it, which I thought was really interesting, because once I read it, I was like, oh yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it. But working together, when Esh says we're incredibly codependent on each other, it's like we both have different skills, and we're both really good at certain things, and those aren't always the same things, which is great, because it makes us stronger when we can lean on each other for certain things. Like I can't draw anywhere near as well as Eshom does. And when Eshom puts our film or our script into a storyboard, like it helps us so much, and helps everybody around us so much to visualize the shots and the angles and how many people are in the shot. And I mean, because it looks like a comic book when he gets done with it. So it's like almost he's so good at interpreting angles and what you could see perspective wise behind it, because I remember I look at his storyboard and I'm like, you sure we can see that far back and actually catch the whatever in the way background there, even at the angle of the building like that? He's like, oh yeah, we can, don't worry, I remember it. I'm like, okay. We go there, and I'll be damned if we don't line up the camera in the spot that he has on the board. And if you can see just everything, which is hard, because a lot of times, there's like a side of a house in your view, and you want the camera here, but like, because you want to see just the first half of the car behind the house peeking out in the background. And it's like, it's tough for me. It's tougher for me. I know I want that, but it's tougher for me to walk into a place, kind of do a quick scan or walk around a little bit, and then go back home and draw it perfectly to scale of within probably 2 or 3 inches of where the camera is going to be sitting as to what we can see perspective wise as it widens out. You know what I mean? But he can do that. And that's just one small thing that he can do that I can't do, that helps us tremendously.
And like, look, on the writing process, like, you know, Ian's just tenacious. He's always a sprinter to get to the page and the keys, and so there's that, right? Like Ian jumps off the cliff and we build the parachute on the way down, but that's just such an invaluable skill that he has not an instant of hesitation or procrastination in his body. So yeah.
But as far as flipping certain things on their head and making them work, like Esh is amazing at flipping things on their head. He'll go through something, and it usually works like this. If you want to know the process, it goes, we sit around and we BS and we throw ideas back and forth until we have something, even if it's just a scene. Oh, we'll start the movie like this, and this guy does that, this and that, and that'll lead to this later. So let's say you come up with an idea of how to begin a film. I'll get really excited. And I was an English major, so I mean, I do like to write. You know, I suffered through 4 years of college classes to do it, and I loved every minute of it. So most people, like my dad, was like, "I don't know how you are an English major." I couldn't stand my English classes. I was like, "I don't know, those are my favorite ones. I love going into them." He's like, "I love biology and chemistry." I was like, "Dad, I can't stand biology and chemistry. I can't stand those classes." But I get really excited about the writing of it. And so I go and I start putting it down, and then I'll give him, let's say 2 or 3 pages the next day, or even 5 pages the next day. He'll go, oh, I like this. Okay, great. You got that in there too. Great. Okay. And then he'll start writing on it and he'll pass it back to me. And then let's say we do that a dozen times, and pretty soon we can't tell even who wrote what in that 5 pages, but we all know that it came from the collaborative session that we had, and that we've tossed it back and forth 12 times or 6 times a piece. And now 12 versions later, we have something that both of us are really excited about, and we're just adding onto and layering onto and layering onto. And by the end of the script, let's say it takes 6 months to come up with something from start to finish, you know, we're happy with everything in there, and we've talked it out, and we visualized it. And then Ash is like, well, by the time we get to making the movie or doing a pitch for it, Ash is going to storyboard a couple of scenes or come up with, you know, he'll put together this great visual pitch. We'll pull images from the internet and he'll put them up on these great colored backgrounds, and they all look very artful and wonderful montages as we put a little bit of verbiage underneath. This is what the setting's gonna look like. You know, these are what the characters are gonna feel like. And this is what the, you know, tone of the film is gonna be like. And we want to use this lens, and we want to use this color palette. And we put that pitch together, and then we walk out and we go to make the movie. Let's say all the wonderful things in between. You find the financing, the actors, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I'm skipping a lot of steps here, but we get out there to make the movie, and now we're directing the movie. And it really is, both of us are pretty synced up at that point. You know, let's say we've had a year with this thing where we've been completely enveloped in it, both of us. And for that entire year, we've been developing literally every angle and look and sight and color palette and what the actor's going to do here. And he does a little turn before he gives the line. I mean, we have that much ridiculous detail at times in the moments. And what the actor does, it's just a blueprint. So if the actor decides to turn the other way or do a backflip and then say the line, that's fine. As long as it fits the tone of the film, great. And it works. Like, we love that. We love when actors add things to it, that things we didn't think of, because that's, you want those brilliant people in there bringing their A game. But in the directing process, like, we were tested once by John Hawkes, and he didn't tell us until afterwards at like a Q&A of a film festival. He's like, I tested these guys. I tested them. I came up to Eshom on the first day and I said, hey, Eshom, what about this? When he was alone. And Eshom gave me an answer. And I was like, okay. He's like, I wandered off, and he's like, 20 minutes later, I saw Ian by himself, and I was like, hey, Ian, what about this? And he gave me the exact same answer. He's like, and then I was like, okay, this is going to work just fine. And I think a lot of that just comes because, like, we love to sit together and talk about, you know, what we want to see or what we're going to do. And by the time we get out there, we're pretty synced up. Like, I'd say 99.9%. And if something pops up, like, hey, we got a car in this shot and it's red instead of blue, like, you guys okay with that? Ash and I look at each other and be like, you okay with the red and blue? Okay, whatever. Sure, we're okay with that. Or, hey, are you okay with that? Nah, it's got to be red. Sorry, guys. You know, like, there's a quick conversation that happens between us, and we know what we're looking for. So if that red car doesn't fit the palette, or it doesn't fit, well, it's got to be blue, because and that red's going to stick out, and it's going to be a sore thumb, and then everyone's attention is going to go to the car. We should probably be blue or some earth tone, or, you know, or whatever. Like, yeah. Those types of questions happen all the time that come up, that pop up quickly, that you have to make it. But we have an idea of what we want already, so solidified that it's a quick conversation, shorthand, boom, we're out, boom, and we're moving on. So that's pretty much how it works. And no one's nervous or has a like an ego. And I think it just comes from, you know, us trusting the other one so much. It's like, yeah, whatever he says is, you pretty much got the answer from me, most likely, you know? Yeah, vice versa. And I think it just comes from, you know, I have a true respect for each other and our perspectives.
you know, it's just fun. We really enjoy working together. And then when we get to the editing process, it's very similar to the writing process in that we edited Fatman in Ian's basement, and we set up 2 workstations that faced each other, and we would each pick a scene. Like Ian would pick 1 through 5, and I would pick 5 through 10, and then he would edit 1 through 5, and I'd edit 5 through 10, and then we would literally go, "You done?" Yep. And then we'd switch chairs, and we would each make adjustments to each other's scenes, and then go back and just do it that way. So it very much echoes the writing process in a lot of ways.
I think every detail that you had realized fully on screen was immaculate. I think I was watching it, and I watched it twice, and I was just amazed at how every detail was explained and how I saw that, and it was really well done. And I think Yousef, if he's on, he has another question for you guys.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Okay, Joseph's he's missing. So I'll ask us, because we want to move to the cast, because you guys have an amazing cast. Mel Gibson, Marion Jean-Baptiste, Walton Goggins, who we love. But I want to talk about the kid. So Chance Hertzfield, right? That's his name. He was incredible. And like that little kid is such a little asshole. And I love it. He reminds me so much of me, and it's great. What was it like finding that kid? Because it must have been hard, right? To find a kid who's so talented.
It was a true eureka moment. So we, look, we'd seen a lot of talented young actors, and they were sending us their audition videos. But we knew we had such limited time and limited budget that we had to have someone that could come in and really be self-sufficient and understand the lines. And we realized that some of the dialogue was pretty tricky for young kids to just get it out of their mouth and articulate the words. And we saw a lot. We did see a lot of the young actors tripping over the lines, and you could tell they didn't quite know what the words meant. And then when we got Chance's video, he was so freaking good, so spot on. Ian and I both turned to each other and we're like, holy smokes. Like, actually, I just got a chill down the back of my neck thinking about that video. And we turned to each other and we said, oh my gosh, this kid's amazing. And we're like, is he too amazing? Like, we were like, maybe he's not acting. Like, maybe this kid is like really a little hellion. We got to get him on a video call and just see how he is, right? So we got him on the video Skype conference, and thank goodness that he's the sweetest kid. He can turn it on and off. He can pivot on a dime. I mean, the young man is just such an incredible talent. And we're so grateful to get Chance on the picture.
Okay, Joseph's back. So do you want to ask your Mel question?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the star of the film, Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
So when you guys were writing the film, did you always envision him to play the Kris Kringle?
Yeah, so we wrote it 14 years ago, and of course the landscape of actors and ages is a lot different 14 years ago. Our initial thought was Jack Nicholson and Johnny Depp. That was our initial casting 14 years ago. Yeah, that would have been an interesting one. But once we saw Mel at a screening for Hacksaw Ridge, he was doing the tour for Hacksaw Ridge and like the screening tour, and he had that beard. And I think he had it because he was shooting Professor and the Madman next, but he got this amazing beard, and he was doing the award circuit, and we went to this Q&A where he was there, and he was just talking about the movie, and you could tell that he was tired because he'd been doing a ton of these. Like, he'd been doing them for months, building up to the Oscars.
And also, like, just doing the movie is a drain. I mean, you come out, it takes a year, so you're just like worn out.
Yeah, but he still had this incredible fire in his eyes. And I remember him just, sort of hunched over, talking to the audience like this, kneading his beard, but the eyes were so passionate. You could tell it was a long year, and this was a long, couple of months, and he was tired, he was exhausted, but there was no lack of passion in the man. And we literally looked at each other and we're like, oh my God, like, that's Kris, like, that's the Santa, like, that's the feeling we want. That what we were able to endow upon him is we were like, oh, if that were Santa, then this were Christmas, and he's trying to pitch kids to be good. Like, that's he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's trying to figure out what to do. He's tired, the passion's still here, but he's very, like, physically tired. We're like, oh man, like, he's perfect. And Mel's kind of in shape, but it had been a long year, and he was similar to the way he was in the movie at the time. And I remember when he came on and we were talking to him, he was like, "Do you want me to gain some weight, get some cookies, and what do you want?" We're all, no, like we want that. We want Fatman to be ironic, or to be like the Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola Santa is bullshit. You know, like this is who Santa really is. He's not fat, really. He's just kind of a, thick guy. He loves cookies. Some of those things are true, but he's a hardworking guy, and he's and we're like, no, we love the way you are. So yeah, it was interesting, and the way that he came on is we went to his agents, and like 3 weeks went by, and we're like, oh man, are we gonna have to find somebody else? Like, this is such a heartbreaker. This is like the guy we wanted. And then I get this email. We've been getting a lot of emails from producers and financiers. We're like, hey, we'll take a meeting with you guys. We like the script. We liked your last film. Let's talk about it. We're like, okay. I get this email that says, hey, I love the script. I thought it was really funny. Let's sit down for a chin wag. And we were just like, what's a chin wag, first off? And then we were like, I didn't know who it was. There was no sign off. And I was like, hey, thanks. I'm glad you dug the film. Who am I speaking with? We'd love to sit down. Thinking it was another financier or producer. And they were like, oh, sorry, I forget to sign off sometimes. This is Mel. And I remember turning to Ash, and I think we hugged at that moment, because we were just so excited that, the number one rookie prospect was interested in coming onto the team, And so they said, hey, you can sit down there for 45 minutes at this cafe. And we went there, and 3.5 hours later, we emerged, slapping each other on the back and like hugging, and like having we had a killer chat just about life and love and the movie and his movies. And I mean, like, we have such respect for him and his movies. Like, he's such a great filmmaker and great actor. We were just so thrilled, to have him on board. And yeah, man, it was a great collaboration. We really had a great time working with him.
Excellent. To pivot slightly, because we've talked a lot about Fatman, but obviously you've got other things. So I can see obviously you worked previously with Octavia Spencer in Small Town Crime, and then your bio states on your website that you are currently working with on a sci-fi project, which also has her in it. So do you see yourselves making like a Hollywood pairing kind of thing? Like, obviously, like in the case of like you've got like Leo and Scorsese and Johnny Depp and Tim Burton. Obviously, there's certain directors meld with certain people. Do you think Octavia's going to be that person for you?
That's interesting. I mean, look, we love working with her. We've made 2 films with her. The first one was Lost on Purpose, and she was in it for a hot minute. And she was just doing a favor for us because she wanted to work with us, and we wanted to work with her because it was right after The Help. And she's like, I got a little time. We're like, hey, would you come down for a day and just play this walk and talk with a couple of guys that are in the film, and just play a nurse, and you got a little bit of a monologue, and just walk down the hallway with these guys and do this pitch. She's like, yeah, that sounds like fun. So she came out to do it. Now she's gotten so busy that when we went to her with Small Town Crime, I mean, we did the whole pitch, the song, the dance, and we were super excited to just tell her about the movie. We knew she loved crime thrillers, because we were working with her on that developing that sci-fi idea right around then. And it's based on a book that she has the rights to. So she was like, I think you guys would be great for this. And we read it, we liked it, and we sat down with her. But while we were sitting down with her, we showed her a trailer to the movie we had just shot with Danny Glover and James Lafferty, Waffle Street. And she was like, oh my God, I love Danny Glover. And she got really excited, and she watched, she's like, this looks great, y'all. This looks great. And then she's like, well, what are you working on now? And we're like, well, we're working on this sci-fi with you. She's like, no, well, what other feature film? Because this is a TV project. And she was like, oh, well, we're like, well, we just did this lookbook for this crime thriller. And she's like, ooh, I love crime thrillers. We're like, oh yeah. She's like, oh, well, let me see this thing. Let me see it. Let me see the book. Yeah. So we start thumbing through the book for her on the laptop. And she's like, oh my God, I got to read this, y'all. I got to read this. So she's like, give me the script. So we emailed her the script. Like 24 hours later, she'd read it. And she's like, I'm EP-ing this shit. We're making, who do you want in it? Like, let's start making lists. Like, give me 10 people that you want in it. Like, we're going to start. And the guy that we came over to her house, we went down the list of people we wanted. And John Hawkes was at the very top. We were just like he just fit all these criteria of like what we wanted to do with that film. And so we pitched her. She was like, is there a cop or something I could be in it? And we were like, well, what do you think about playing the sister? Like, it'd be fun. We pitched her like, most of the movies. Right. Most of the movies are like The Blind Side, where it's like this black kid, he goes into this family, they help him out, he becomes a football superstar. We were like, what if we sort of play the, you know, anti-blind side, and we have like this white guy gets adopted by a black family and then he fucks up their lives. We're like, that's kind of funny in a fucked up way. And she really dug that idea. And so she's like, all right, I'll play the sister. And yeah, and then from there, we just cast the rest of the film out. And there's some funny stories there. But
before that, like Octavia Spitzer is a friend. You know, like we knew her as a friend before we started working with her in a professional capacity. And I think we're always going to have that connection. And we enjoy working with her every time. We can't wait to do it again and again.
We would put her in every damn thing if she wasn't really freaking busy, you know, committing herself to other wonderful projects. So usually if we're not working together, it's usually because she's, you know, eight years deep in commitments because she's in real high demand. And if she can sneak us in, or if we can get her, you know, far enough out to where she doesn't have something she's committed to, then yeah, I mean, we would love to keep working with her. Like that sci-fi is interesting. She's on it to produce right now. And of course there's a role that she'd be absolutely wonderful in. And of course she would be game to play it, but it's like, does it line up with the commitments that she's already done? Cause she's in like 2 other series for Apple, and she's got some other features that she's committed to. And it's like, let's say, because here's the tricky part about the business, right? It's like, say Octavia wants to star in it and she's EP in it, but if she commits to starring in it, then she can't take on any other roles in the interim, and she's kind of stuck. Whenever that goes, I'm going to go do that. So she's not doing anything in the interim. So the way most actors and producers and writers and directors play it is they say, hey, look, I want to do that. That would be great. But I have to leave myself open so that if these other commitments or these other things I'm interested in start to go first, I can tip into them. And then when this one gets in the queue, in the line, I can get on it. Or if I'm committed to this down the line, I can't do it. So, but most of them wouldn't want to hold up a project that they're excited about either, because if that movie goes and it happens to coincide, or that show goes and it happens to coincide with something else that Octavia's in, like who knows when the next time we're going to be getting, you know, that those producers and financing lined up, or that studio or that TV, you know, place lined up to do it again. So she would be like, I won't do the role. Let's go find another actor that's good for it, and we'll slot them in and we'll do it, because it's such a timing thing. It really is. It's all timing, you know. And it's frustrating at times because you're like, oh, that person would be so perfect in that role. It sucks they're already committed to, you know, this children's show or whatever that they're doing. But yeah, it is just timing. A lot of times, you know, it just happens. And then when you do it, most of the time, Esh and I are like, we couldn't see it going down any other way, you know, like with the actors or the collaborators that we had. So it happens for a reason. We feel like
they all come together the way they're meant to come together.
Exactly.
Excellent way of looking at it as well.
Another
Yousef.
long answer there, Ben.
We love the long answers.
I'm loving this stuff. This is really interesting to hear your process. All these stories, I'm writing down. I'm watching that movie after this. Like I can't wait.
Yeah, so
I love it, man.
all of us here on this podcast, we're all film fans, but I think some of us even want to get into the industry. Do you have any tips or advice, like how to start, like how to get there? Like, do you guys prefer film school or no film school? Any advice?
Well, I mean, I can tell you the path that we went on, right?
Okay.
And our path is very DIY. We actually
do it yourself. Okay.
Yeah, we wanted to go to film. We were intrigued by film school. We moved to LA. We went to USC and we talked to everyone there. We did the tour of the campus, and they were like, you know, if your favorite movie is Star Wars, and you should be here, you know. And then we went over to UCLA and we did the tour of the campus, and we talked to them. And they said, if your favorite movie is Star Wars, you should get the fuck out of here. And then we went over to LA Film School, and they said, hey, you know, about the 3rd year, you're gonna get to touch a camera. And it was just like, okay. And while we were weighing this, I got rear-ended in a car accident, and so I decided to instead just, you know, pound out the dents on my beloved Volkswagen and take that money and buy the DVX 100 camera, which had just come out at the time. And so we took that camera. I used my old laptop from school, and we just started shooting small independent movies around LA, you know, and we went to the woods and shot a movie up there, and we just did a bunch of stuff. And for us, like, I think the number one in nowadays, like, your cell phone shoots far better, superior video than that camera we were shooting back then. So it's like, from nowadays, all of our laptops can edit video. You know, you can write scripts on. It's just like, go out and just make stuff. That's literally the advice that we would have, is like, go out and make stuff.
Yeah, and I think like our first film, just to put this in perspective, because it sounds, because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, just go make a film. Well, I can't get the money together to make the film. But our first feature film was $1,500, with $1,500. And we cast out of the restaurant and the movie theater that we worked at. And we cast aspiring actors. And our crew was 3 people. It was me, Eshom, and our dad. And so our dad, who used to be a professional photographer, literally used 2 Coleman lanterns from Walmart, a flashlight, and a bounce card to light the entire film. So that's about $25 or $50 worth of stuff that he picked up at Walmart to light an entire feature film. And we went out there and shot for 7 days, which is incredibly quick. But in 7 days, we had 90% of the film shot, and we had a couple of interiors that we went back to LA and shot over the course of these other 2 days. And, you know, we shot for like 3 hours one day and 3 hours the other day. So it really was like 2 half days. So it was like in 9 days, we shot the whole film.
Then we came back to work, or we came back to LA. We read the manual on how to, you know, for Final Cut Pro at the time. We're using Adobe Premiere now, but we read the manual and we're like, okay, great. And this is when they actually had a printed manual, but we just started doing it. Now you just watch the tutorials online. So yeah, there's really just, I don't know. I mean, that's our method, right? There's no wrong or way to do it. There's a bunch of different ways, but the way we did it was that way.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, a lot of the things that come with making a film are a lot of the things people say in a lot of the books you read. They're like, network. Well, there's no better way to network than making a film, going to film festivals and talking to other filmmakers that are working on things. Because you'll make a film, you'll go to a film festival, even if it's a short film, you'll talk to other people doing shorts, other people doing features. But I mean, we'd made a lot of shorts before we made that feature. We probably made like 20 shorts, and we were just hungry to make a feature film. And so we wrote something, and I remember finishing the script and Eshom reading it and going, because we had the idea, and then I was like, I'm just going to write it. I think I wrote it in like 2 or 3 weeks. And it was, this is not Batman, you know, I'm not writing something incredibly complicated. It was like, our first movie was called Squirrel Trap. And it was 5 junior college students are writing a paper on Thoreau. And so they decide to go out on like this 3-day camping trip to sort of get back to nature and get their papers written with experience, 3 days in the woods. And it's 5 very different people. So it's one guy who's on meds, trying to do it, and he's a little more of an outcast. And then it's the princess, and it's the nerd, and the dad who's coming back to college. So we had like 5 characters that we chose, and we cast with our friends, basically, that were aspiring actors. And some of those people we still work with today. But we just went out and we just made it, man. And we just did it. And we learned a ton doing it.
Is it a great movie? No, it's not. But did we learn an absolute mountain on the movie? Yes. And that was
and it's interesting. Yeah. It's fun because you'll make a movie like that for $1,500. We went to a film festival. We watched it in like a 250 seat movie theater with like 50 people in it. But we were just like, oh my God, this is like, it's like incredible. People are laughing at the right places, and they're scared at the right places. And if they weren't, we're like, we got to cut that out, or we got to work on that. We got to edit that, right? You're constantly like, we went home and cut 10 minutes out of that movie after that one film festival. And then
it was only 10 minutes long.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we ended up with like a 75-minute movie or something like that, or 71 minutes or something by the end of it. But it was, we learned a ton making that movie. And then a year later, we had another movie that we'd made with 4 or 5 people we'd worked with, other writer directors. We all wrote and directed like 20 minutes. Again, cast out of the movie theater, cast out of Tony Roma's, restaurant where I was serving. And that one won a bunch of film festivals. And again, like, we'd learned so much from that first film that the second film, which was a $5,000 film. And the great thing about that is there was 5 writer directors, and we everyone did their own 20-minute segment, and then we cut them together, intercut them together like traffic,
Yeah, we're like, and Robert Altman's shortcuts, intercut like traffic.
Yeah. And like, we just thought of a beginning and ending that everyone could have, that they would all end up at and all start at, and everyone could kind of go on their own adventure in the middle. Everyone wrote their scripts, and then we helped each other shoot them. So there was a 5-man crew on that one, and we just hired actors out of the places that we had, and that budget was $5,000 altogether. But the great thing was there was 5 writer directors, and everybody put $1,000 in basically, and funded their films and did all their own post. And then we put the movies together, and we won like 5 or 6 film festivals with that damn thing. Miramax called, Focus called. It was incredible. Ultimately didn't get distribution through those companies, but to have that kind of attention on a $5,000 movie with nobody in it, because we all starred in it and had people from the restaurants and shit in it. So it wasn't like there was any actors in it. And that's ultimately what killed us, is that the budget was $5,000, and you know, it was not a high budget movie. And there was no star to sort of lean on. And those studios, that movie made it all the way to the top of 2 places, Focus and Miramax. And they ultimately said no. They said, this is a really entertaining movie, but this is going to be hard for us to market in a way, because we don't have a star and the budget is so low. We can't, there's nothing to really lean into besides it's an entertaining movie. So anyway, but that helped us a ton, because that kind of attention, like, we got agents, managers, everybody did.
Yeah, and that was the thing. I remember like coming off of that and going like, well, if the movie, and ultimately it did work as a movie, but our worst case scenario was like, well, even if the movie doesn't work, we'll each have a 20-minute short film as a reel.
Exactly.
So that was sort of the pitch to the guys.
But that really set us off. After we made those 2 movies, we really felt like we could do anything. And then we got made agents and managers, and we wrote for like 2 or 3 years. They're like, hey, stop making those little movies. We're going to get you a $5 million movie next. And we're like, okay, great. So write a $5 million movie. And we kept writing. We wrote 2 or 3 of these movies. One of them was Small Town Crime. And one of them was Fatman, that we were pushing. But again, like we said, it took us 14 years to get Fatman going, and we were rewriting it every year. It's just that it was such a crazy film that it took us having to do Small Town Crime to do it. But after that 3 or 4 years of writing, we got into a ton of rooms and we became better writers, but no one was making anything. And we were like, what? Like, we're kind of stalled out. Like, it's great. We're getting into all these rooms that we never could have gotten into. Like, we need to make something again. So then we started raising money, and we wrote a movie called Lost on Purpose, which was like our American Graffiti or Our Last Picture Show or HUD. Those were our inspiration for it. But it was about where we grew up and the people that we grew up with. And that movie,
shot it in our hometown.
We shot it in our hometown. We raised about $200,000. We shot it in our hometown, and it looks like about $1 million or $2 million, because we used every favor and every person we know, everything we'd accumulated over the 5 years of being in town at that point, to make it. Or I guess 9 years at that point. It had been 9 years at that point. 9. We got into town in 2002, and we made Lost on Purpose in 2011, and that really was like, we made that film for $200,000. It looked like $1 million or $2 million, and everybody said so when we went places. And we had name actors, some faces and names of people you would recognize from TV shows and movies. And that really was like, okay, we can take you seriously now as directors and writers, or directors. And then we got hired to do Waffle Street, which got us Small Town Crime, which got us Fatman.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint, for sure.
It is. It really is.
So before we go, I want to go through some rapid fire questions. We got these on Twitter. We asked people to send us questions, and surprisingly, they did. Surprisingly, because we're nobody. Anyway, so we're just gonna do these rapid fire. The first one says the final shootout scene was epic. I love how this low budget film made it feel like such a bigger budget. I'd love to know how they shot the final battle. It was very seamless.
I'd say a lot of planning.
Yeah, just
planning,
a ton of
planning.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a ton of pre-planning. Ian and I storyboarded out the scenes very meticulously. We backed into that, so we built the whole set piece to that. A thing we're really passionate about is using blanks instead of comping in a lot of the muzzle flashes, because it seems to give actors a better feel for the weapons and all that good stuff. And then we like to use a lot of practical effects as well. So we use as much real stuff as we can that's safe. And then we really do a tremendous amount of planning with our DP, the stunt team, and all of the practical effects people.
Because you have to, it's not, both shootouts that we've done, the one in Small Town Crime and the one in Fatman, they both sort of exceed the grasp of budget and scope of what we had to do the film. But again, with a lot of planning, because a lot of times you only have one car, or you only have, one this or that, and you've got to put holes in it, and then you need to cut right, and then, or 2 coats, or 2 this or whatever, and it's like, okay, so we're gonna have to shoot this before we have to shoot that, and then we're gonna have to jump back and shoot this clean. So you just have to really sort of plan it out of how you're going to shoot it, and how those cars and the things around you and how many blanks you have and how many squibs you have and and it's really just a lot of planning, because it can get pear-shaped when it's like, let's say in Fatman with the snow, if you shoot too far into the sequence, then the snow gets trampled and it doesn't look pristine for a lot of those shots. So we had to kind of shoot like this in Fatman. And then we also had weather to contend with, because once your crew walks over that snow, it was knee deep. And once the crew walks over it, it's like a herd of, elephants have walked over it. It's just smashed tight. So there's no give. And it just looks like, people are walking on ice rather than walking on snow. So you wanted that feel. We wanted that feel that like, oh, it's fresh snow and they're coming together for the first time. We didn't want all these trails and tracks and everything padded down. So we had to plan that out. And then, yeah, a lot of it was the weather too, was a pain in the ass. So we knew we were going to get, and you have to wait sort of to the day before. Go ahead, Esh.
Yeah, because to Ian's point, like the weather was a pain in the ass because we had so we looked at the calendar and we couldn't move the shootout, to where we would get 4 consistent days of snow just because of our actor schedules. And so we looked at the calendar and we had 2 days of snow, which we were excited about. And then we had a bright sunny day, which we were not excited about. And then we had the overcast day in the middle. So we had to actually shoot the beginning of the shootout first with all the wides and everything, all the snow stuff and the close-ups. And then we moved to the end of the shootout where they're rolling around on the ground, stabbing each other and wrestling and beating on each other. And then we went back and we shot the middle, which was the part where he gets to the tractor, shoots him, moves up to the woodpile. So we had to shoot it out of order that way to make the weather arc work.
And the small town crime shootout, if people have watched that, is similar. You've got 5 people in that shootout, but it's similar in that we had like 4 nights to shoot it, and the nights were cutting in Utah at the time. The light, which we didn't account for. We thought we had plenty of time, but then when we started shooting, the nights were so short because of the time of year. We had like 8.5 hour nights, which is nuts. It wouldn't get dark until like 10:30 p.m. or something, and then it would be light again by like 6 or 6:30. It was just nuts. Or what is that? 10:30 to maybe it was 5:30 or something. And then you lose an hour for lunch in the middle. So we only had like 8.5 hours to shoot every night, which was horrible, because you usually have 12 hours. So we would lose a lot of the, like 4 hours of the day, basically, because of the time of year it was. But again, we had to shoot that out of order because we only had one working car that the villains were driving. And we couldn't punch holes in it as we were shooting it. So you'd have to wait and then punch the holes in it and then repair the front because the next shot didn't have holes in it. It was just, so we had to shoot it all out of order again. And it's just a mind, it's like you're in the matrix trying to figure out how to what order you need to shoot all this in accordance to what's going to be exploding and what's already exploded in the shot before, so that when you're shooting, those things have gone off already or they haven't, because you're shooting out of order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And you guys brought up the coat. I love that coat on Walton. It looked amazing.
Oh, right on.
When it came to the elves, what was the rationale around their diet and sleep schedule, and was there any research that went into the whole lore of it?
I would say that part, we just, the what's been spoken of elves is like they have a sweet tooth. So we thought that would be funny to just take that and run. We totally made up, because we believe their bodies operate special, unique from normal humans. And so that we just made up their whole body chemistry. That's totally fictitious. Do not abide by the elves' diet. You will not do well in life.
Like a lot of that stuff, like their work habits and whatnot. Like, I mean, we were literally just as we were with like Chris's financial / political, all that stuff, the government, he's working for all that stuff that we had to sort of think through. It was the same thing with the elves on a certain level, because you sort of have to back into, okay, these things have been alive for quite a while. Well, what is that? Is it magic? Well, there is a bit of magic to it, but we tried to do it with, they have a certain diet, and of course they're like woodland creatures, or but we also wanted to make sure that they were just kind of like another race of humans in a way, you know what I mean, in our opinion, because they just kind of have pointy ears. Their skin's a little bit of a different shade. It's kind of green, but they're not like bright green. We wanted to make them like, if you went if you went into the subway and you saw this guy with a beanie on covering his ears, you probably wouldn't look twice. You know what I mean? He just has a slight,
Yellow
a slight
out.
hue of greenish yellow to him. It wasn't like he's like bright green. You're like, why is that guy bright green? But yeah, we just tried to make it very, very down to earth and realistic, so that if they wanted to go to the grocery store or something, you probably wouldn't blink twice at it.
Yeah, and I think you guys pulled it off. Do you have any plans to tackle any other folklore icons like the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, any of those?
I think we're looking to do a sequel to Fatman, and who knows who pops up in that?
We have some ideas.
Yeah.
We have some ideas. There aren't any cats we want to let out of the bag, but yeah, we have some ideas that we think will be fun. And then, I mean, look, and of course, these are just ideas right now. So, what we think is funny right now or is going to be awesome right now, 6 months from now when we're putting pen to pad or pen to paper and putting it down, or by the time we finish the script, it could have changed. So it's hard to commit to something right now as to what we're going to do with it or where we're going to go with it, because right now we have a slew of ideas and a general idea of kind of what we want to do with it. And those always change. You always kind of, and you want them to change. You want them to layer up and get more complicated and fun and be able to incorporate a lot of cool stuff into it. So it'll probably change from what we have right now.
But as far as like what we have sort of going forward, as far as what Ian and I are excited about working on, is like we really like to bring our tone and voice to some more some different genres. We'd like to do a little sci-fi, a little horror, and maybe a true Western here and there. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, that got us all excited just looking at everyone's face when you said that you're working on a sequel. I mean, we're beyond thrilled.
I would say this. First one's Road Warrior. We're looking to do Mad Max. This is the second one.
Or vice versa.
Or I'm sorry, I flipped that. You're right. Thank you. If the first one's Mad Max,
the first one's Mad Max, the second one's our Road Warrior. That's how we're thinking of it.
Yeah.
I just want to say, as a horror super fan, I would love to see what your genre sensibilities when it comes to twisting things like that. I would love to see what you would do with a horror, whether it be a slasher, supernatural. I think whatever it is, you could definitely take something and mold it into something really amazing. So whatever you do, it's a sequel to Fatman, if it's a horror film, a sci-fi film, we're looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Just a couple more questions that we have that I want to run through really quickly. In the movie, Billy receives a lump of coal from Santa. What did Billy ask Santa for? What did he want?
That is a great question. And I remember one of the producers really wanting us to have like that on a list somewhere of exactly what he was asking. And look, we have in our heads what he was asking for, but I kind of don't want to like ruin it for some other people, because I've seen people post things on Twitter and whatnot about what they thought he was asking for. And I really feel like their answers are probably a lot more fun than what we had in our heads, honestly, because it's like we had something, a lot more grounded and a lot more sort of rooted in the story. And I've seen some really funny, fun things in there. It's like, it almost becomes like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. What's in the briefcase? Like, what did he ask for? Which I love those explanations that are so fucking, out in outer space at times at what's in the briefcase for Pulp Fiction. They're funner than what was initially the idea of what was in the briefcase. So yeah, I would like to keep that under my hat. Esh, you as well?
Your own interpretation. Yeah, I would say audience
exactly.
Yeah, fair enough. Also, Hollywood is very franchise heavy right now. So if you guys got the opportunity, what franchise would you want to join? Would you want to do like a Star Wars, Marvel, DC?
So two of them are precious. Like there's but you're saying like it has to be comic book genre. I would say
just any major franchise.
Predator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mad Max.
Those are damn good. I'd say in a little more I guess, a little more contemporary, a little more comic book. I would say Batman and Punisher are two that we really love in the comic book genre.
Intrigued with Gold too. I like that character.
But yeah, there's some properties that we love too. There's like Sam and Twitch. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. I love Sam and Twitch. We both do. I've read a bunch of Jeff Lemire's work that I really like. Yeah, those aren't franchises. Those are just really cool comic books. But
yeah, I mean, we need to get Kevin Feige on the phone, because I think a Punisher movie with you guys, That
Dude,
would
we would
kill.
chew that up.
That would
feel like
kill.
that's the one that we haven't quite sweet spotted it yet, and I
Yeah.
feel like we could do something with that.
I totally agree.
Yeah. And then the last question, this is a little bit, this is my question because I am a Canadian and I'm moving to Ontario soon. And you guys shot the film in Ontario. So what were kind of your favorite little spots to hang out in between shooting?
Oh my
See,
God.
it's a little different. We were in Ottawa, and you're going to move to what part of Ontario are you going to move to?
I'm going to Toronto for Toronto Film School.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will say, sadly, we didn't get to spend too much time in Toronto because it's 4 hours away from Ottawa. So we got to spend a little bit of time there a couple of days there. We spent probably overall, we spent like a week there total. Which as we would come in and out to do casting sessions, we would come in and out to look at post houses, come in and out to look at other things and meet other crew members that we were possibly going to hire or exchange cameras, or we probably in there a week total.
But I would say one, if there's an indulgence that you're feeling, like pampering yourself a little bit or a significant other, whatever it is, want a little romantic getaway, get in the car, head out to Nordique, the spa. It'll be worth the investment.
Look, I'm not a spa guy. Esh isn't
Neither
a
am
spa
I.
guy. Esh is definitely not a spa guy. But I remember him saying, someone gifted them to us, right? Did someone gift them to us, or did we just go?
Everyone told us to go there, and we were like, I'm not a spa guy. You're not a spa guy. They're like, no.
I would even say our DP, Johnny Durango, is not a spa guy. And Matt, our gaffer, Matt Gonzalez, is probably not a spa guy. But those guys went like half a dozen times, which is nuts. And Esh went, once? You just go once?
I just went the once, yeah.
I was supposed to go, and then COVID hit. My wife and I were going to go as sort of a gift to ourselves for wrapping. And we had, we celebrated Christmas up there and whatnot. So we gifted each other these Nordique, spa packages, which is you go there, you spend 10 hours there and have a good time jumping in between like all these weird, crazy hot tubs. Beyond the massage element of it, there's like the hot tubs and the snowballs, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff they do there. But we did not get to go because the day we were scheduled to go was the day after production wrapped. And not only did they shut down all the movie productions the day after we wrapped, which we were really fortunate to get out and finish, but they shut down the bathhouse, which I did not, it sucked, but one day we'll be back.
Yeah. When everything is all, all normal again, I'm sure, you can go and experience that. Okay. I think we're done. We don't want to keep you here, guys, too long. So thank you so much for doing this. Honestly, sincerely, we're not, a big podcast by any means. So it's amazing to have two real talented directors sitting with us. So thank you. You also have a new show coming out on HULU, right? And it's going to be coming out a day after this is released. So do you guys want to plug that a little bit and then we'll wrap it up?
Yeah, that'd be great. So the show is Everyone is Doing Great. It's from the brainchild of James Lafferty and Stephen Coletti, who are One Tree Hill alumnus. They had this really funny idea about these two guys who very funny and very heartfelt, in that they had this great idea that they came to us with after we shot Small Town Crime. And James Lafferty, we've made like 3 or 4 films with. So he came to us and said, "Hey, what do you think about this TV show? Would you guys be interested in helping me produce it?" It's two guys who are on this, as you'll see, it's very meta. It's these two guys that were on this kind of teeny bopper or teen, show, and they spent like a decade on it, and now, it's over, and one guy is just kind of sitting around getting stoned all day, not really looking for work, and the other guy is taking himself way too seriously and trying to get work, but basically they're unemployable because they're both kind of fuck ups in a way, and it's they have the
stigma of the show on them a little bit.
Right, the stigma of the show is kind of cramping their style. And they have a roller coaster ride of trying to get work and trying to get their love lives in shape. and trying to deal with each other's neurosis. Yeah, and it's 8 episodes. They should all be dropping on the 13th.
On Hulu.
Yeah, it's on Hulu, and it's a lot of fun, man. They did a great job, creatively. They did an incredible job putting that thing together, and we had a lot of fun helping them produce it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, check out that show. Watch Fatman. It's amazing. Honestly, it's really, really good. And I guess that's it. So thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe to youtube.com/themovielover for a video version of this interview, which will go up on the weekend. We also have our blue ribbons, which is like an award ceremony type of thing that we're doing, because why not? And Fatman, we nominated for most underrated film.
Yes. Thank you.
Vote for that. And be sure to follow us on Twitter @TheCouncilPod and Instagram @the_CouncilPod, and follow these guys on there on Twitter and Instagram and everything. They're awesome. And yeah, thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much for being
for
here.
joining us.
So much.
Yeah.
It was such a pleasure.
You're
Thank
welcome
you.
back anytime. Thank you so much.
Please come back.
Oh, hey, thanks for watching. And remember, full episodes are available wherever you get your podcasts.
With new episodes Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, links in the description box.
And be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to stay caught up to date with The Council.
Boys, I'm excited.